were non-Black women in my life and finding out their rates and in comparison to mine and figuring out that it was significantly less, I was really angry, and I decided that I'm no longer gonna put up with that anymore. So something I told Deb is sometimes I will, negotiate a rate even if I don't have to. Even if I think the rate is perfectly fine, I'll ask for something higher because I understand that given the statistics, I am being lowballed, and also people expect you to negotiate. So when it comes to, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
We have so much to say.
Yeah, when it comes to value, I think that, we can acknowledge all of the outside factors and how we would be devalued based off of who we are, being women or being a woman of color or being a Black woman. But I also had to acknowledge the ways that the small parts that I could control and how I valued myself, right? So a lot of people compliment me on being so humble, and I knew someone who said, Sofiya, people love you because you don't flex. And I'm like, maybe I should flex, right? Maybe I should tell people what I do, all the artists I've interviewed, all the awards that I've won, because clearly people don't know that, and that's why they're coming to me with these really offensive rates. So I think understanding your work and really acknowledging all that you've done and all that you've accomplished. If you have to write it out, write it out. If you have to say it to yourself in the mirror and reminding yourself of how awesome and amazing you are, and then approaching the email and that client with that same type of energy as well.
I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how you price yourself is ultimately how it reflects for people who look like you. Can you speak a little bit to Nile, could you speak a little bit to how underpricing yourself ultimately isn't good? And since you do lead a team, can you talk about what you think about when you're pricing yourself and how it ultimately impacts your team?
Yeah, I think when you're underpricing yourself, sometimes you might just take on these jobs just to try to make ends meet. And I think in those situations are fine if that's what you have to do at the time. But I think there comes a point where you might have to charge a little bit more. And I think if they challenge your price, you could just explain to them, this is the industry standard. It helps to just Google what other people are charging or to have mentors. I know it's taboo to discuss with other people how much you're making, but I think it's extremely important if you are able to make a connection with someone and to feel comfortable enough negotiating and talking to them about what they're charging. And the second part was how it's important to value my team.
Or how does how does your pricing, now that you lead a team, how does pricing ultimately, what do you think about when you're determining a price?
Yeah, when I'm paying my team, it's really important for you to make sure that everyone that I'm working with feels sustained as they're working. So I've actually recently changed my business model. Initially, I was charging clients flat rates for design work. And oftentimes, even with putting a limit on the amount of revisions, that would really tap us out sometimes. Even if it was under the amount of hours that flat rate will cover, but it still went on for several months because we were waiting 2 weeks for a client to offer feedback. So instead, with the agency, we're now charging a retainer package so that everyone can feel supported and get the hourly rate that they wanted from the very beginning on our contract. And if it comes down to many revisions, the client just replenishes the retainer when it goes under 10%. So the package is very similar to what attorneys will do. So that's something I do for Creative Review.
That's awesome. Can you, I'm just going to assume everyone has zero knowledge. Could you explain a little bit about what a retainer is and what are the benefits of going the retainer route instead of a flat rate route?
Yeah, I guess I can explain it. I'll explain it in a visual art sense because I feel like that might be the simplest. Let's say I'm working on a mural, and let's say I charge $8,000 flat for that mural. It might take me several months to work on that mural. There might be unforeseen things about the wall or, I don't know, the supplies that I have that might extend the project. And so that $8,000 might be drained extremely quickly. With the retainer, I usually predict, for example, this project will take between 40 to 50 hours to complete. And with that amount, this is what I estimate that you'll get with that based on past experience. And then I just explain, I'll keep you updated each week on progress done and how many hours were clocked. And then if we can get their project done within the retainer, that's great. And they can always reach out to me in the future and ask for revisions or tips or consulting. And again, we just fill that against the retainer. But if it exceeds the retainer, then we just ask, is it okay if you replenish your retainer because we've gone over it? And for the most part, I usually try to get clients to a place where they're able to generate revenue first. So for example, if we're working on an e-commerce website, I think we'll just design their shop page and their home page first. But then if they need a blog later down the line, we'll say, well, let's prioritize the things that will make you money first. And then later down the line, we can extend and do extra things for your website.
I love that. You know, I know a year and a half ago when I first started, I was literally making up my pricing. Like, I'm just trying to be transparent here. When I tell you I had no idea what I was pricing, I really didn't know. And I think something that you brought up, Nile, was like talking and being open about, you know, and not being so quite taboo about it all, really helped me a lot. Living in Malaysia, it was not uncommon for like my Uber driver to ask me how much money I was making. And at first I was offended by it, but then I quickly gained to realize, like, you know, actually we're at a disadvantage when we don't talk about money. And, you know, not to get all hippie on you, but ultimately that's what the higher ups don't want us to do, is to be open and have that honest dialogue about money. So Mel, do you think, like, what do you think about when you're determining your pricing? Do you think about, you know, past conversations that you've had with other people and their pricing? What are all the factors that come into play when you're determining a price for a client?
Thank you for asking, Deb.
Yeah, no problem, Melissa Lam.
All right, so I mean, I love talking about pricing. I think we need to, as women, talk about it more, as Black and brown women talk about it more, because that's the only way we can do better and get better. I remember when I first started freelancing in like 2012, I was working at a Thai restaurant, and they hired this designer, web designer, to come in, and she like had her team and a photographer, and I found out she was charging $8,000 for that site, and I was just like mind boggled, because I was like $200 at the time. I was just starting out, and I just remember saying, like, I want to get to that level. And I only knew about that level because someone told me, and I saw the website, heard like what she produced, and I made a mental note, like, okay, this is what people are charging for this kind of end result and product. And so when I price, honestly, it's like a shit show for my pricing, as I do it multiple ways. You know, I have friends that reach out to me, or acquaintances, and I give them somewhat of a cheaper rate. I have larger clients, you know, and I definitely am trying to figure out how much are they making, how much will the website I build for them or the branding I design for them, how will that impact their business for them to make more money. So there's a bunch of factors, and at the end of the day, I'll write a quote and then sometimes double it right before I press send. And when I've done that, they've said yes, they've come back to me and said yes. And then I'm like thinking in my mind, damn, if I didn't freak out or panic right before I sent this like proposal out, I would have lost a few grand just because, right? And I think value is a lot about how much you value yourself, but also the value providing externally. So does your shit actually look good enough to charge a few $1,000s? Like, you also be realistic with yourself. You know, if you're like, my stuff back in the day was kind of weak, you know, and I needed to improve, and I spent, you know, hours at conferences and workshops and like late nights, you know, learning design. And that's part of why I value my work and why I charge what I charge, because I put in the work and I know it. So yeah, it's so many factors of like confidence, the actual work you're putting in. Is your end result like killer? Like, will other people, you know, want to have that same result? And then just doubling it, especially if you are a Black and brown woman at the end of the day.
I think that's great advice. If you are a Black and brown woman, just throw on an extra 25%, throw on an extra 50%, because chances are, like Sofiya said, you're already getting the low end of the deal, and we need to like even that playing field out. So why not charge? If they reached out to you, then they want your advice.
Yeah, you know, just to piggyback off of the conversation of being open about pricing, you know, I think that's especially important when we're talking about allyship amongst, you know, men or non-Black women or white women. I think it's really important to be open about what you're getting paid. And part of what really activated me and woke me up was when a guy friend of mine a few years ago, he's Black, he told me that he did a speaking gig at a university, and they accidentally gave him the sheet with everyone's race instead of like his payment. and he saw that the person that was getting paid the least was the black woman with the most experience. And then also in conversation with him, he didn't even realize, like in conversation with him talking about something he got paid for from a company, I realized he was paid the same amount in an hour that if for work that took me a year to do. So he was paid $1,000 an hour, and I took on a gig from them that took like a year to do and was paid like the same amount.
Wow.
So that really activated me, and I think it's important to be transparent about your rates for that reason. And he said ever since he got that folder with that information, he always tells people what he's making. Especially black women, what he's making.
Yeah, for sure. It's really helped me a lot, like learning that transparency. I always say like, the best business decision I made was going on vacation with Melissa and two of our other freelance friends, because it just opened my eyes to, essentially that there were boss women making money, and I was holding myself back essentially because I felt like I, didn't necessarily deserve that level of income. But, I think I do. I think I'm that great,
I have one more tip to add. I think in addition to just charging what other people who are doing similar work might be charging, I think it also helps, like if you are tracking how much you're clocking or the services that you're offering over time with bookkeeping services, it really helps to know like what a fair deal is. For example, I use QuickBooks.
Oh wait.
Did it cut off? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use QuickBooks for accounting and bookkeeping, and it tells me like how much I can charge for things like flyers and logos. It tells me what my overhead is for the business, so that helps a lot.
Yeah, I think something that's like a common theme here is like investing in yourself essentially. Like you're able to make more when you invest in yourself, and I think of that as like a mental thing too. Once I stopped, being cheap and started, actually paying for the pro versions of the services that I use very often, even though that was only like a $50 additional bill in my month, I think mentally it got me to the place where I was like, this is a business now, and I need to start taking it seriously as a business, and I have a business bill, and whether that means like a $50, bill or a $300 conference, I think also when you start making those changes, you start seeing those results financially. I think a lot of people here, teeter, are dashers, I guess, in a sense, like don't only stick to one job, they do multiple things. So Nile, you're both an artist and a business owner, and even though you do graphic design, I'm sure working with a company that wants graphic design and website services is vastly different than working with, the mural arts program. So how do you kind of approach pricing for both? Do you kind of determine things in different ways, and how can other people apply that mindset to what they're doing?
Yeah, so I started Creative Repute, the graphic design agency, because I was at a point where I wasn't able to work on the project requests that were coming to me solo. So I partnered with other artists, creatives, and graphic designers. In terms of pricing, I think as an artist, something that helps me is if I really believe in the thing that I'm working on, like if it's for a good cause, then I'll work with the client on whatever price they can. But if I'm at a point where I don't have enough time in my day to work on the project, like I'll charge more, and I'll explain to them that I honestly can't begin working on this until about a month from now. It sounds outlandish, and it gives them the option to hire someone else if they need to, because I'm being realistic, I really might not have time to work on it, or they will still want to work with me and they'll pay me the increased amount that I'm asking for. So I think just raising your prices when you feel like you're too busy to take something on helps a lot. And then again, if you honestly are deeply invested in, for example, a lot of nonprofits reach out to me that have really good causes, but might not have a lot of money. If you really believe in the work that they're doing, then you can work with them on whatever they can afford.
Yeah, I feel that in terms of just knowing when too much is too much and when to raise your rate. I think it's a conversation that like Mel, you and I have a lot. So how do you know when it's time to give yourself a raise, and how do you kind of tell yourself like, yo, it's time to add an extra zero to that invoice?
Every time, baby. I want to talk real quickly about what you just mentioned, Niall, about pricing and, well, this is a whole panel, honestly, but when it comes to client budgets, I have, clients that obviously range in budgets. And again, like, I'm trying to focus more on impact as well as supporting entrepreneurs and brands that I believe in. And, if a client comes to me saying that my budget's too high, what I'll do is I'll ask them for a counter offer, like, what can you afford? And then I'll cut down the services that I was initially going to provide. So that way I'm not breaking my back for half the job, but we're still like, coming off with what we want. They get a new website or brand, and I get, another client to put in my portfolio. Or so yeah, you can always just like, negotiation is key. But when it comes to like knowing when to give yourself a raise, again, it's like I kind of base things off of like the life I want to live, the lifestyle I want to live. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to live a luxurious life like I see on Pinterest. So that takes money, and it's that kind of, like, someone asked me a few years ago, like, how did you get that abundance mindset? And I thought that was freaking awesome, and I didn't know I had it. But coming from a middle class immigrant family from the boonies of Bangladesh to America, like, I grew up not very rich, and so that's kind of like my motivation, is like to make up for the childhood that I saw all the time but didn't have, but to also honor like the legacy my parents wanted me to have, bringing me here and having me here. So everything I do is like I do it without like fear or regret, because I know I deserve the money. I know I love the work I do. I know I can do a great job, and it's also just back pay for all the shit that's happened in my family and legacy and history. So that's why I just keep charging more. And with that comes more responsibility. I need to hire a team, but that's just part of like my shifting your mind from being a freelancer to a CEO, which I'm currently doing. So
yeah, I absolutely love that. I feel like I'm starting to step into my own power, and everything that I'm talking about today is literally stuff I've learned within the past month or something, so I think that it's all just like we all take our time learning. I think, again, like a conversation you and I had a lot last year in particular was negotiating, Sofiya. And you would tell me a lot about the negotiations you were making, and I tried to act cool, you know that phrase, act like you've been there before. So I'd be on the phone with her like, yeah, that's all. Oh yeah, go for it, girl. But in my mind, I'm like, oh snap, I never even thought to ask for a relocation fee. I never thought to ask for, people to cover my first month if I was moving someplace else. So how do you kind of get into that boss mindset of like, yo, I deserve this? And also, when you're in the middle of a negotiation and it's really, really stressful, like they can be, and you're doubting yourself, are there certain things you tell yourself to get yourself through that? How do you kind of like get into that mental state to recognize that you deserve what you're asking for?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. Melissa, when you were talking about, being the child of immigrants, I'm also the child of immigrants, right? My parents are from Jamaica. They came here. They worked super hard. So I think that sometimes when you come from groups that are deemed marginalized, when you're a woman and you're taught to be kind of humble, to be smaller, to be grateful for what you get, when you're of color and you're taught to be that way, I think sometimes we don't, and I'll talk to my friends about this, we don't even have a concept of how much money is out there because we've never really seen it, right? We don't even have a concept. Like the work that we're doing consistently, there are people who are asking for 3 times as much to do the same work, but we may not have a concept of it because we've never been near that before. So I think that, I think a lot of that, you said, getting into the right mental space for that is being kind of fed up and kind of, you're saying, back pay almost. Because I think about all of the years where I wasn't doing that. So now I'm like, no, this time I am going to do that. I have a lot of interesting negotiation stories, especially in the corporate world. And, I took on this project where someone asked me, it was Brooklyn Nets. Okay. They asked me to take my project, my Black History project, and create profiles for them. And we're supposed to do it within 3 days. it extended to 5 days. The shooter on the project wasn't a full-time shooter, so he had to take off work in order to shoot. And I had to advocate for him because he wasn't able to be on the call and say, hey, like, he's gonna have to get paid more because he can no longer do his job so that he can be here to shoot for this project. And I'm on this conference call with the CMO of the Brooklyn Nets and like the photographer on my team, and she literally screams because she's just like, she's like, what? This is extremely over budget. Da, da, da. Like, she's just like, this is outrageous. And I have to breathe and I have to explain to her that this man is losing money doing this project for you. We said 3 days. It is extended to 5 days because you asked for this in a tight turnaround. So there have been a lot of instances where I'm in a professional space where people have really outlandish reactions to asking for more money. And to prepare for that, like I said, I just remind myself that I'm coming back for like what I'm worth. And also, I release it, right? Like I say, you know what? So let's say I'm negotiating with someone and recently, this has been happening for the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot of opportunities. And I'm like, well, this is great. I would love to be a part of this, but my rate is double this, right? And then there will be silence, right? So I prepare myself to release that project, right? To just say, it's okay. They might say no, and that's okay. It wasn't meant for you. Thank God that like it wasn't able to work out because now you can make space to do something else that you wanted to do, right? So I think preparing yourself for the no, preparing yourself to walk away, but then also asking yourself, okay, is this something that's truly impactful? Like Nile said, is this something that I really want to do that's impactful for my community? What can I learn from this? Is this something that I want to do even if it's below my rate? Is there a way that we can negotiate? So I think, I think my anger and my fed upness really is what makes me stand strong in the face of the wind when things gets crazy. And also remembering it's not just about me, right? Like I was advocating for my team. I was advocating for my team member. And also with my own project, a lot of the funding for my own project comes from me, right? So if I'm not advocating for my capital, right, how can I actually pay the people that,
You're supposed to kill them, but I'm so torn about killing them. It's okay. I feel like it's our fault that they're here, so I don't want to end their lives.
But yeah, so if I'm not advocating for the capital that I need, how can I then pay the contractors who work with me on my project what they deserve? Who are all black, right? How can I pay them what they deserve if I don't demand what I deserve? If I don't have the capital myself?
Can I say something just real quick about that? Is growing up again, child of immigrant. And even now I see, amazing houses and wealth, and I never understood how to get there, and now I'm realizing like we have to be make the generational wealth. Like that is my role right now, is something greater than just making a website. I'm trying to create something long lasting in this country and be financially wealthy enough to provide my grandkids a dope ass house so that they can kind of further the mission and whatnot. So that's motivation, because it's something that that's why I quit my full-time job. I didn't want to cap to my salary. I wanted to test myself every day and prove to other people that they don't have to have a trust fund to be successful. So you have to find your own motivation, I'd say, for why you charge what you charge, and keep reminding yourself of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Once I started to recognize that it was beyond myself, then it just pushed me further, because I think as a black woman, you tend to think I'll do this for this rate because, I'm just grateful that they asked me. And, now I recognize I actually have a lot to bring to the table, and I'm good at what I do, and I'm very smart as well as being very pretty. That's just thrown in there. I actually keep a mirror on my desk, and every time I'm feeling apprehensive about sending a rate or sending a proposal, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, yo, I deserve this, because I deserve nice things. I deserve brand new sneakers. I deserve to help my family out if they need money financially. And that really, really pushes me to, add an extra little bit on, add an extra 25% on, an extra 50% on. What I do hate is when I do send a proposal and they're immediately like, okay, and they don't try to negotiate with me at all. So that got me thinking about pricing mistakes that you guys have made in the past. Are there any that you want to like share, or any experiences that you've had that you're like, if I could just redo this again, or tell my younger self or newer to the industry self this particular thing, what would it be?
I think a pricing mistake would be starting work before the client has sent payment. So I think if it takes the client forever to send payment at the beginning, it's going to take them just as long to send payment at the end. So I would say always work on a contract and always make sure the client sends payment before work starts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could go on, but I'd say there's gonna be some like L's as much as there's gonna be some wins when it comes to pricing, and the way you get to a win is by having the L's, right? So I've priced too low for the amount of hours and effort put into projects sometimes, but now I know that, and for the next client that wants the same thing, I can double that. So I just see it as all like experience to get to a happy medium or a happy price point. So yeah, for me, I'd say you have to kind of have some losses.
Yeah, I agree with Melissa. I've learned so much from the mistakes that I've made, and like up until last week, like I realized I made a big mistake when a few months ago I made an entire treatment for a project. The treatment then got the executive producer a grant for it, and then I was no longer, he said he could no longer afford me to actually execute the project. And I didn't ask for a deposit. So I created this treatment without getting paid for it. And now I have to rely on his morality to be fair and pay me for the treatment, which he's going to do. But in the future, it would be better for me to be like, all right, I'm not opening up my laptop, I'm not creating a treatment until you give me a deposit, or at least you pay me to create this treatment. And also, when I think about my job at the Philadelphia Inquirer, my parents swore they told me to negotiate, but I did not negotiate, and I should have negotiated. And I had met a friend whose mother worked in HR, and she said that most companies, they give you the lowest price because they expect you to negotiate. And when I think back at what I was getting paid, I was like, that is crazy. And there's still journalists, a lot of journalists are underpaid, but I was just like, and work really hard. But I was like, that was so crazy that I didn't negotiate that rate. So definitely, no matter what, even if you're like, wow, this is really, really good, just negotiate, because you'd be surprised. They might be like, yeah, and that's something else that's pushed me to ask for more money and demand my worth, is when I do it and the person's like, yeah, no problem. And I'm like, wow, so you mean this whole time I could have been doing this, but I just didn't open my mouth and ask.
Sorry. Also, real quick, I think we need to also stop assuming the clients that reach out to us are poor, or like they don't have money, because I've done that. I'm like giving them, like a nice friendly rate, and then they're like, oh, well, my partners are my investors. I'm like, you didn't mention that in this scope. You didn't know. Tell me you had like investors. So don't stop assuming people don't have money.
I just want to jump on to that as well. That's so important, because with a recent client as well, someone reached out to me. She has a nonprofit. She's a Black woman, and the work that she does, is for Black women and girls. And I knew she received some funding, and I was trying to figure out what to price her, because I'm like, I'm not going to give her this corporate price. But then I'm also like, I know that this is going to take a lot of work, so I don't want to give her a really, really low price. So it took me a while to find like a really good balance. And even when I found the balance, I was like, oh, I don't know, this might be too high. And she was like, okay, sounds good. I was like, wow. So yeah, definitely don't assume at all.
Yeah, I think something that I've learned recently is like literally breaking it down. Like you can break it down in so many different ways. Like take the price that you are offering and break it down by week of how much the project is going to be. And even if you feel like it's not going to take a ton of hours, say to yourself like, oh, this is going to be $300 a week. This is going to be $100 a week. And that's always made me feel a little better, because I'm like, okay, if you're a restaurant, you can afford $250 a week. Obviously things are different now, but if you're a hotel, you can definitely afford $400 a week. That's one of your rooms for one of the nights. So breaking it down that way helped me feel a little better. Also, literally Googling, how much money that role makes on average, and then adding an extra 20% for taxes really helped me do that, because I think when I look at the big number, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so scared. Like, you know, like, do I really, like, should I really be sending this? But then breaking it down and recognizing that I got bills to pay too. And that's really helped me a lot. You guys touched upon it when we talked about nonprofits, but what's your views on friend rates, and, you know, how do you kind of like determine, you know, how to support your community or support your friend while still keeping your pricing integrity?
I think that if they're your friend, you definitely want to see them succeed. So I'm all for supporting friends if you have the capacity. But it also reminds me of that childhood book, The Giving Tree. Like, you have to also set boundaries. And I think that if you're honest with your friend and you say, like, you know, I really can't afford to work on this for this rate, then as your friend, hopefully they understand and respect that just the same. So I think that's my view on friendship. Just be honest with each other about what you actually can do for each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, I have multiple friend rates depending on how good of a friend you are.
Keep it real.
And my exes owe me so much money for all the help I've given out. So yeah, so it depends. But you know, if I also I want to judge them as like any client. And if they're making money or about to make money, I feel like it's, you know, you need to invest in your marketing and branding. And I just so happen to be good at that, so you need to invest in me. So yeah, I'll like, you know, cut off a little bit, but it's not going to be pennies, because, you know, I think you still, as an entrepreneur, need to learn about investing in yourself. I'll just give you a cheaper rate for that, but it's usually like maybe $500 less. So like a typical package might be $2,500 for branding. I'll charge them like $2,000, $1,500 depending on the friend. So they're still paying, but it's not going to be the full cost I scam others with. So.
Yeah, I touched on it before with kind of like finding that balance when it's with nonprofits and for friends. And I think a lot of it is asking yourself questions like, what's the lift? You know, what's going to be expected of me? But I'm also really grateful that I have friends who understand the power of supporting with their money. So when I throw an event or anything, I'll be like, oh yeah, you guys get it for free. They're like, no, Sofiya, we want to pay. And like, what is your rate? And I may come down a little bit, but I think it's also important to have friends or try to find a way to express that. That's also important to support with your money, and I try to do that with them as well. Deb's done projects for me. I have friends who have done projects for me, and I do my best to respect their rate. And if I can't, I say, listen, like, that's a little too high. Like, I'm sorry. Like, is there still any way that you can work on this? How can we make this work? So, yeah.
I bend over backwards for Sofiya. I'm like, this is my rate. Okay, JK, this is my rate. Because I just want to be a part of everything she has going on. Didn't mean for this to be Sofiya's fan club. I just haven't seen her in months. So I want to have people leave with, you know, actual tools that they could use to help themselves determine pricing. You spoke a little bit about QuickBooks, but are there any tools that you use either to figure out what other people are making, or to kind of get a greater sense of how to determine your own pricing?
Yeah, I think in addition to like QuickBooks and online tools and just simply Googling what the industry standard is for that kind of work, I think the next best tool would probably be a mentor, if you can find one. And then I'd also recommend, as you start to grow, to find a really good accountant and attorney. So those are really good tools or resources.
Those are awesome. So I would say, let's see, I blacked out. So I just asking people how much they charge. So just, you know, going up to people, asking them, or I'll email or DM. Like, I've tweeted people. A lot of times, like in the field I do, people have like pricing guides on their website, so I'll just give them my email and get that download just so I can scope how they price things out. But, you know, again, just being transparent with the people around you, like not seeing everyone as competition, but there's plenty of, you know, money to share in this world. So asking friends that are in the same, you know, field what they charge is helpful. And then also Facebook groups. I started joining a bunch of like web designer boss lady groups and stuff, and it's been really helpful in my lonely quarantine days as I'm on my computer and I have a question and I don't know who to ask, so I'll just go to these Facebook groups and it's just like all these other lonely women that are also doing the same thing. So that's helped, is just finding the right communities to ask.
Yeah, definitely mentors, as Nile,
Nile.
Niall, because I always known you as Nile in my head.
Yeah, it's spelled that way.
Niall. Definitely mentors, as Niall said, find that, whatever your field is, find that producer you admire, that director you admire, and, really try to have a transparent conversation with them about how much they charge, how to demand what they charge. For me, that's what's really been helpful for me. And as she mentioned as well, a lawyer is key. I say this on every single panel. It doesn't have to cost a ton. If you have a homie who is in law school and has a basic understanding of contract law, if they can look over your work agreements or anything just to make sure that you're going to get paid. I have a lawyer friend who does that for me, and he'll be like, all right, Sophia, I'm going to change this from a net 30 to a net 15 to make sure you're going to get paid. And then I'm going to pencil in here that if they're late, that this is how much you're going to get charged. And you want to change this because this takes away your intellectual property. So I think it's important for you to do that yourself, but also to have someone else who can do that for you. And there are a lot of pro bono resources that can help artists and different creatives or anyone depending on their field as well.
I think I have one more tip. It's a little sneaky, but you can also just call other companies that might be doing similar things and pretend as though you want to buy their services to find out what they pay.
I love that.
And then just copy it.
It's okay. If you're a brown or black woman, you're allowed to do anything. So I completely agree with that. And I want to you briefly touched on it, Sophia, but a late fee. I think a lot of people don't realize that they can and should and are allowed to put a late fee in their freelance contracts. So I really would, I just want to emphasize, look into put in late fees in your contracts. So we're gonna, end. Is there anything else that you want people to keep in mind before we end? And where can people find out about your services and hire you? All of you guys.
I think we touched on a lot, so I can't think of anything else that I want to add right now, but I'm open to questions if you guys have any. I'm on social media at Nile Livingston on all social media platforms.
So let's see, I am at melissaalam.com, and then all social, I'm Ring the Alam. Hit me up. I love talking about money and pricing and freelance work.
So I'm thinking about what else I can add. I think this conversation is about money, and I think that money has become such a dirty concept to talk about, especially within our society. And I don't want it to seem like, when Melissa says, I want a big house, or when I say, I'm demanding what I'm worth, it's not about greed, but money is the way that we communicate our value. So it's really about show me how much you value me, and also this is what is going to pay my bills within the society that we live in. So I think that it's important that you ensure that you're getting what you deserve and what can help you succeed and survive in this world. So, just wanted to add that. You can find me at Sofiya Ballin, that's S-O-F as in fire, I-Y-A, and then Ballin, B-A-L-L-I-N, everywhere.
And have a contract, I forgot, that's my tip. Have a contract.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I meant to say this at the beginning. I'm someone who definitely sees the world right now and does not like the way I believe that money is a tool, and it's a tool that could be used for exploitation, but it's also a tool that could be used to secure freedom for a lot of marginalized groups, whether you're a woman, whether you're a black woman, whether you're a woman of color. It's ultimately what you decide to do. So I personally believe that as I continue to gain and as I continue to grow, I will continue to give. That's why we're lucky enough to donate all the proceeds from this event. I want to see every, woman succeed. I want to see every marginalized person succeed. I want to see all my homies succeed, whether or not they're, people of color or they're, no matter who they are. So I'm really grateful to be here today. I think I can take maybe 1 or 2 questions if you guys have any. No? All right, that's cool too. All right, well, if you have any questions, you know where to find these incredible people. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This is truly the start. We barely got a chance to touch on anything, so stay in touch, you guys. You can find me Debonair with the 0 on Instagram. Let's chat.